This can great. So I'm going to go ahead and start then. So today on The Dead Life, we'll hear from author Laura Carney, whose book, My Father's List, How Living My Dad's Dreams Set Me Free, should inspire us all. On the cusp of, I hate saying this as a woman, somewhere in the middle, a newlywed journalist discovers and finishes the bucket list of her late free-spirited father. 54 adventures in 6 years. That's what 38-year-old journalist Laura Carney embarked on when she discovered her late father Mick's bucket list. This is Laura Carney's second appearance on The Dead Life. Let's see what she's been up to. You can follow me on Instagram at Medium Allison. You can find me on my Facebook fan page, and you can binge on my YouTube videos where you can watch episodes of The Dead Life. If you have a question for me or a paranormal story to share, call me and leave me a message at 802-DEAD-811. If you have abilities and are looking for a classroom to strengthen your abilities, go to deaduniversity.com for more information. Come join my class and let me teach you about mediumship, or join one of the other 3 courses offered at Dead University. Well, Laura, welcome to my show.
Hi, I'm so happy to be back. Thanks for having me again.
Oh my gosh, it's my pleasure. I love the spirit behind your book. I love the idea of you walking in your father's footsteps and experiencing his passion list. So, you lost your dad when you were 25, and I lost my dad when I was 30. So I can understand losing a father at a younger age, and you were younger than I was. Um, do you feel like you know him so much better now, having more life experience? Do you have a better understanding of who he is?
Yeah, I think there was just something about going after 54 of his dreams that we had found undone that made me see him more as a person and less as my dad. And it gave me more compassion for him. And it helped me to reach a point of forgiveness I needed to get to so I could process grief.
Mm-hmm.
So, now when I think of him now, I don't think I even really think of him as who he was when he was alive, but rather what his spirit has become, because I have experienced such kinship with it as I've started to pursue bigger endeavors in my life and becoming a writer and having the courage to do certain things I couldn't do before. I really do feel like there's something that must happen when we die where we just become the purest version of what we
Yeah.
were when we were here.
Yeah, I agree. If you don't mind my asking, how did your dad pass?
He died in a car crash with a distracted driver as a teenager who was making a phone call.
Oh, it's such a tragic, pointless passing. It's preventable completely. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. And I allowed it to make me feel really insecure for many years, as though he was just an unlucky person, and then maybe I was an unlucky person just by default. And I let it make me kind of phobic of, anything could happen at any time. Like it
Right.
made me much more aware of that. And instead of developing this like seize the day mentality, I developed this like be afraid of everything all the time mentality, which doesn't actually align with who I really am, which
Sure.
I didn't know until I started going after his dreams.
It's interesting because a lot of people who survive near death experiences become the opposite of being cautious. They just throw caution to the wind and they're a little riskier because they know life is short, and they tend to seize it a little harder than the rest of us do. But I can understand why you would feel that way. When you lose the first person closest to you, it's the first time you really are forced to face your mortality. And so for you,
Mhm.
I would have also been afraid of everything around the corner. My dad died at 67, but of natural causes. So it wasn't at the hands of someone else, but I'd worked enough murders to know walking down the wrong street or being in the wrong place at the wrong time can cost you. And it's frustrating when it's something as senseless as what happened to your father. So I'm sorry that you went through that. Not a lot of people
Thank
understand
you.
that feeling. And within a couple of weeks of losing your dad, the cards stopped coming, the casseroles stopped coming. people stop checking on you, they don't know what to say to you, and you figure out who your friends are pretty fast. So, that was my
Yeah, but I mean, now I no, that's true, especially when you're that age, especially when
right.
you're that young. But now I look at it almost as a blessing for me because I am always the person who, when I know someone who's just experienced the death of a loved one, I make sure I send them the C.S. Lewis book, and I make sure I check on them a month later and 2 months later because I know what it's like. So I've become a person who can be in a position to give. So that's been kind of cool because now I'm at an age in my 40s where that is happening more often.
Sure. Yeah, you'll see it more. I'm a spoonful of comfort person myself. I send the soft blanket for them to wrap themselves up in and the soups and the baguettes because I know people don't eat after somebody dies. They pick at things because you have no appetite. So it's interesting when you have a great understanding of death at an early age. I think we become more empathetic to other people going through it, no matter what age they're at, because we have a better understanding of the pain and the grief. So, did you
Yeah,
com
I mean, it's interesting how, oh, sorry, go
oh,
ahead.
I was gonna say, did you complete his list?
I did, and I was gonna say, it's interesting how I think I've been going through that again a little bit in the
Mhm.
past month or so, because now the book tour is over. So I finished the list about a year ago, December 2022. Then the book was published, and then I went on book tour starting in June, and then it just finished in October. So since then, I have definitely been, and like for a little while, I wasn't eating very much, very much, and
Yeah.
I'm doing better now. I'm sleeping really well now, and I'm eating well again. But it definitely was a few weeks there where it was like that.
So you relived the grief and
I
it
think so, yeah.
yeah, that's what it sounds like, and it took your, taste for food away, your desire to eat. I mean, I can understand that. People always ask me, what I do to work out. I experience other people's grief, I guess, so I don't eat as much as other people do, and, I guess that would be the diet right there for me.
That
So
makes so much sense, yeah. I mean, because the other thing that was happening on my tour was I was hearing about other people's grief at every stop. I mean, I think
yes.
you told me back in June that that would happen, and you were right. I found myself hugging strangers all the time.
Well, and when you hug them, sometimes to them, you almost feel as though they're hugging the person they lost, and you'll feel yourself take on the energy of the person that they lost, and it's
Oh
because the
my
person
gosh.
that died is working through you.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that, but actually, when I did my reading in Georgia, someone in the audience told me they were a psychic medium, and she gave me a free reading later on, and because she
Mhm.
was actually friends with my host, so it wasn't like a complete stranger.
Oh, good.
And she said, what's happening at these, I'm sorry?
I said, "Oh, good." Glad she wasn't a complete stranger there. That could be
Yeah,
awkward.
but like she's like, what's happening to you when you do your events is sometimes you're saying things that are more like your dad than you, like if they're
Mhm,
funnier or more entertaining than you know yourself to be. And she said, but the other thing that's happening is the people who come to hear you speak are bringing their people with them. So your dad's almost behaving like a referee, and he's
mhm.
kind of letting people come through and then saying, okay, that's enough.
She's quite correct in her assessment. I would have to completely agree. And you're going to feel it when you hug some of the people. You'll hold on a little longer and you're not sure why,
Yes.
but yes, but you feel like the person that's working through you isn't done. Like they need to hold on to that person a little longer, right?
Oh my gosh, this is now making so much sense to me.
I'm glad I
I
could.
would get so tired too.
Yes, it does zap you of energy when you take on other people's grief. It's why I stay home a lot, and
Yeah.
I love to be amongst the living and observe people with a lot of energy, but I give my energy away to the people that are grieving, so they walk away feeling great, and I feel like somebody
Yep.
sucked the life out of me, which is how you felt, I'm sure.
People would come up to me at the end and I swear they'd be like glowing. They were like so happy. And then I would leave and I would have to eat like a whole bowl of spaghetti or something.
Yes, take a nap, have a stiff
Yeah.
drink, all those things, yes. So, on your dad's bucket list, were there any experiences that you chose to save until the end because you were a little hesitant to do them, or were they all okay?
Yeah, yeah, the singing one. It didn't actually, I didn't do that deliberately. I just started working with my cousin who was a musician about 3 years before the end. And then we had the pandemic, so I couldn't go to his house.
Hmm.
And it just ended up happening that the two of us are Irish and have the gift of gab, and we'd sit there talking for 5 hours and catching up before we would actually get into recording. So it still was like a wonderful experience, but that one definitely ended up being, I never knew that was going to be the last one, but it ended up being that way because I was just like, I'm spent. I got to finish this thing. And I just did my vocals in my closet here at home and sent them to him. So that was how I finished it.
It's exhausting going through your books, and I went through that too when I'd read them for audio. You re-experience the emotion often as though it's happening for the first time, and it's in our spiritual DNA once you've been traumatized by the loss, and it immediately kicks up the dust of that loss, and you re-experience it as though it's happening for the first time often. Not at the same level or depth, but a sample of it, but you still remember exactly how it felt when you found out he died, where you heard those words, your dad died, and you just think they must be mistaken, that it has to be somebody
Yeah,
else.
it's interesting with the way that my dad died, because I know what you mean when I recorded my audiobook too, and I did have that feeling. And I think it was good that I had that recording 5 songs list item. I'm happy that one ended up being at the end because it was the closest to who he was because he was a singer.
Mhm.
But I have actually, and I've heard this is true for other people who've had someone die in a car crash. I have had dreams where he's still alive. And it's like, oh, you lied to us. Where have you been this whole time? Because I think there's something so unreal about it when it's not
Sure.
an illness.
Well, he's showing you that he is still alive. It's just in a different way than we know it in the physical world, without limitations for him. But he's trying to get you to sample his energy, to feel what he feels like so that you don't carry the sorrow in your heart or the moments you
Yeah.
didn't have with him, but rather the ones that you did that were gifts.
Yeah, I mean, I feel I've had this lucky opportunity now to create new memories via this list, doing it even after his death. So now I know this is going to sound strange, but even
Not to me.
today with you saying, with you saying, oh, you lost him, like it just, whenever anyone says you lost him, or unfortunately, like none of that feels real to me anymore. And I was getting that way a little bit the last time we spoke, but now, certainly, I don't feel like I lost him at all because I feel like my connection with him in spirit has
Yeah.
enabled me to be a person who can give to so many other people who aren't able to have that. I mean, I know I'm preaching to the choir right now, but
Well, I mean, it just means you turned a corner, and a lot of people that are grieving refuse to embrace the loved one in spirit. And so they never advance forward and they choose to sit in the grief because the grief is what tethers them to the last time their loved one was alive. And they'd rather die inside and die on the hill in that moment with their loved one than to get to where you've gotten to in your process. So you did turn a corner, and I did that with my dad as well. But initially, when they die and you hear it for the first time that your dad died, it just, it's like a ton of bricks. And for me, I just thought they were mistaken. I'm like, you mean my grandmother? You don't mean my dad. My dad's, I just was not ready to accept that. Even though I predicted it, I really wanted to be wrong on that passing. And that was a big lesson for me to learn that it's not in my control to stop something that was set in stone. So that was part of my path. But for you to get to a point where he's part of your life and that he works through you, he speaks through you, he hugs others and comforts them through you, as do their loved ones through you. It's an amazing thing to be able to sort of give in to being a vessel for them to speak through and to heal through, which is why people walk away with a bounce in their step after you hug them and after they hear your talk, because it resonates with their soul and it awakens that ability for them to connect in the now and forward with that person, that the death is in the past. So you help a lot of people. You should be very proud.
Yeah, I feel useful. I'll put it
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah.
In a way I never expected or could have known.
Well, and you probably do come from a long line of Irish seers. So a lot of people who are Irish have that natural instinct with the dead and with spirit and with predictions, and they're just naturally clairvoyant and able to connect in healing and light work. So I'm not surprised when somebody says they're Irish and I'm talking to them and they're going down the path you're going down, because it's a, tale as old as time. Ireland, the people are in tune. They get it, and it's nice to have somebody like you that maybe pragmatically as a journalist, when you were a journalist, tried to process it academically, but that you came to a
Yeah.
point where you were able to process it through your heart. And this list that your dad left, the bucket list, gave you the tools to connect with him again. And that's very special. So I did
Thank
have a couple
Yeah.
of questions for you. Oh, so did writing the book about your experience with the bucket list, did that close your chapter on grieving for your dad, or was it a new beginning and connecting with him in spirit, which you literally just answered right before I asked the question? So case in point there, Irish. Um and your book tour was exhausting but gratifying, and I'm sure you're getting great feedback from your readers, and I know that a bunch of my listeners and followers on YouTube are also going to be checking out your book because it gives them a tool, as it did you, to reconnect with the person that they lost, that they love. And the dead always come through and say, "Oh, I love it. Hold it up high and proud. I'm good with that." Um, the dead the dead always come through, and it's so frustrating for them because they never left us. And then we'll say, I've reconnected with them when they never disconnected from us. You know, they held on that soul level. So this is all a part of the physical world evolution and trying to raise our frequency to be closer to their frequency, which is far more knowledgeable than ours and advanced. And it helps us grow as people. And I think that it seems as though writing a bucket list can help all of our children through their grieving process in the future. This is something that parents should read and then create their own bucket list to leave for their child who hasn't lost them yet, but one day will lose them. And it'll give them a way to find their way back to the parents that they love and miss. I mean, do you find that to be helpful? It sounds like it was
Yeah,
key for you.
I think so. I think it's just helpful in general for people to write down goals and write down things they care about and want to do in their lives, as opposed to just kind of letting the forces that be guide how they live.
Mm,
But I also think, and I think as you become an adult and you get older, you sort of start to develop a new kind of bond with your parents. So I think that's also what I was doing here. I was trying to bond with my dad in a new way, but I just had to find a creative way to do it since he wasn't living.
right. Well, I think it was brilliant that you did it. And I'm sure it was his voice inside of you saying, you have to do this. He was
Yeah.
he was putting the breadcrumbs down for you to heal and to get
Yeah,
back.
I mean, yeah, it's not a coincidence that it happened right after I got married. It's just not. It took a long time for me to walk down the aisle and when I was afraid of divorce because my parents divorced, but then when I finally did it, it was like I know I'm doing this for me. Like I know this is something I need to do. I'm not going to let the fear take over. So I think that that was the reason that I finally had made such a big choice like that, that I was ready. Like I think if I had I think I did glance at the list once when I was 25, just by accident. And because I remember seeing Talk with the President and
Yeah.
thinking, oh my God, that's so embarrassing. And I never could have actually done it then. I wouldn't have taken it seriously and I would have been embarrassed by it. So I think it just showed up at exactly the right time.
A bit of a foreshadowing for things to come in your future. That bucket list was going to become pivotal for you. A catalyst, really.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and a bucket list,
Definitely.
I think people think that bucket lists have to be large things, jumping out of airplanes, I want to go to the moon, big things, but it can be little things. And I find the little things just as important as some of the more difficult to attain items on a list. So What would you say about the little things for people out there that it's a good start to start with the small things and making your bucket list and not getting overwhelmed?
Yeah, I think we're multifaceted. We have all kinds of things we want to do in our lives. And I noticed that when I did things on my dad's list that seemed smaller, like grow a watermelon, it actually ended up being huge. Because I was a person who, like the watermelon itself was not. The watermelon itself was about golf ball sized.
Oh, I thought you were a
But I was
massive
a person.
watermelon. I'm like, she grew a
No, but I mean, we ended up actually making the end pages of the book watermelon print just because it's
I
so
love
important.
that.
And it's like the very center of my book is a picture of me holding this watermelon in my hands, and it's like a golf ball size.
I love
And
your cat. Don't even mind your cat. We've had cats all.
sorry.
I actually love that he's talking to you now because often when I do readings, the animals start to react in the room and the dogs start
Really?
barking and the cats start meowing and all of a sudden they have to be where you're at because they're telling you he's here. Don't you see him? Like they're trying to get your attention. So I love that your cat's
Oh my
meowing. They
God.
don't mind.
Chills. I could see like the glow in her eyes back there.
Uh,
Um, yeah, I mean, I already knew my dad was here as soon as you came on today because you're wearing that bright green shirt. And then I realized, oh, I accidentally wore green. And I wore a green dress for every single reading that I did.
really?
And that was because the whole time I did the book, I would hold this little green
Oh, how
heart,
funny.
this aventurine,
I
because
had
it's the stone of adventures.
I had no idea why I picked the green blouse today, and I actually had to
Yeah,
question
it was
myself.
subconscious.
Yeah, it was off. He obviously was whispering in my ear, "You look good in green, wear that," but it was for a different reason for you. And then you've got a
Well,
green
yeah,
light in the background there on your bookshelf too. It was on
yep.
green while you were talking. Now it's purple.
I'm sure it was. Yeah. And and this is really eerie. So one of the cool things that happened because of my readings was I got to reconnect with my dad's brother,
Hmm.
who looks just like him. And he walked
Oh,
into the reading in Baltimore, and I was like, it was like him walking into the room. And then I got
wow.
to see him talking with my husband, and he had just listened to our podcast, and he's like, "Oh, she did a great job. She really let you talk."
Oh, that's
I
nice.
guess he listens to them a lot.
It's so
But anyway,
those little moments are so significant. Even you getting to feel a fraction of your dad's energy in his brother being there with you and with your husband, as though your dad's saying to you, "I've met your husband. Like I brought him to you. As a matter of fact, you're welcome."
oh yeah, they got to meet just the one time, but to not to see them have a conversation, even though it was my uncle, it wasn't my dad. But
Mhm.
the coolest thing about all of that though was, well, this wasn't the coolest thing. I mean, just getting to reconnect with him was, but the eerie thing about it was he came to the next reading too. He came for a repeat performance and he brought this picture with him. And the picture was from my grandfather's funeral, and all the brothers and nephews and uncles, like all of the male Carneys are standing in a row. My dad's smack in the middle, and he's wearing a bright green sweater.
I love that. That's so
So of
fantastic.
course we recreated the picture with me in the middle in a green dress, and I thought, oh, this is why I'm wearing them. Okay.
That's so special. I love that. Those significant moments that people will ask, why am I not getting signs? Often they are getting signs and they're overlooking them or dismissing them with a skeptical mind instead of embracing that feeling and allowing themselves to feel joy in that moment. It's like give yourself the win on that. They're clearly,
That's how you know.
yes,
Yeah.
your soul resonates with their soul, like recognizes their soul, and you feel comforted by that interaction. And that's your soul saying to you, you don't need your body to connect with him and to give him a hug or to acknowledge him in some way. You have your soul, which is much stronger and more aware than anything of our physical makeup. So I'm glad you've had those experiences. I think people are afraid to write a bucket list because they have to face their mortality. Death is a natural part of life, and our journey is as important as how much time we spend here. Even if a person's bucket list was completed by them, someone who loves them can still go through the bucket list themselves to feel closer to the deceased loved one. And I hope your book take some of the fear out of writing the bucket list and out of death for people because it's something
Yeah.
we're just naturally born repelled by. And it's just a part of all of our paths. It's life, so I'd like to help take
Yeah,
some
yeah, I
fear
hope
out of it
so.
too.
I mean, you asked earlier what would you recommend? Like, what are the benefits of having a bucket
Yes.
list? And I actually, now that we're talking about this, I think when you write down those goals and then one day you die, but your children have them, if they decide to do even just one or two of them, it's almost like you're now opening a door for them to connect with you in spirit. Because I just connected with my dad for practical reasons, like why did you want to jump out of an airplane? Why did you want to swim across a river? So it started out making sense that I would be talking to him in my head. And it didn't occur to me for a little while there, like, oh, that's what's been happening the whole time since he died. But I just wasn't paying attention because I think we get so caught up in the human definitions of things and we're not realizing there's a spiritual definition to someone's death that's not the same.
Agreed. And I will say, with my bucket list, I made in my early 30s, which I think is unusual. I took my daughters with me to do some of them with me already. So they can go back later and do them again, like Lucky Charms in Ireland and, eating a Waldorf salad at the Waldorf Astoria. But they don't have to because they've completed a number of them with me together and we have pictures. So it's kind of nice to have some of those too, if you have the luxury of that. Obviously, I'm well versed in death. So it's something I thought of a lot earlier in life than a lot of people do. But I did have fun rolling down the hill of clovers with them in Ireland. It's something I always wanted to do. I don't know why, but I did not go down quite as gracefully as I had imagined in my mind as a child. There was a lot of thumping as I went around in circles, and it was not graceful, but I at least got it accomplished. So, what do you want my listeners to remember about your dad? What's your dad's name?
Mick.
Nick.
Yeah, his name was Mick. And
Oh, Mick.
Mick, yeah, M-I-C-K. Like I mean, you can't get a more Irish name than that, right?
McDougal,
I,
McDonough,
what,
yes, Mick. Okay, yes.
and the last name's Carney. It almost sounds like it's Mick Carney, like boy, when I said that for some reason I had chills go through my body. I think that I think what he is hoping through my doing this is that people appreciate being alive and are grateful for it and
Yeah.
actually do something with it. When I had that opportunity to have that reading with that psychic from Georgia, she's like, he just wants to be known. Like he was supposed to be known, and it's like that's just now happening through me. And I mean, I view that even more than just be famous or have everyone know about him. I view that as like, I think everybody wants that. I think everybody wants a feeling of being known. And you
Right.
can't have that feeling of being known or understood by others unless you're actually putting yourself out there. And that's been the greatest gift to me of doing his bucket list was I just like, I'm not a phony person, but I certainly
No,
had a persona before.
sure.
And all of that just went away because I had no time for it because I was trying to meet deadlines I'd set for myself. And I had to be real to meet new people, to, just for practical reasons, to travel, to do these list items. But I found it was a better way for me to live. And I was much happier just being myself anywhere I
Yeah.
went. So that's what I think gets to be my message from doing his list. And I hope that connects with people because really when you're making choices to impress other people or to prove something, you're just wasting a lot of time.
I couldn't agree with you more. After my dad died, like I already had very little editing ability before he died. So after
Shocking.
after my dad died, I'm like, yeah, you weren't a real friend. Get out of here. I'm good with that. Like I just didn't care. I just spoke my truth. And if it offended, someone, it's like, well, okay, exit stage left, all good. Because I noticed the universe would send me a new friend when I'd lose one to my honesty. And these are the people, and I think you know this too, that'll say, I just want you to tell me, like, if I do something, just tell me that, if it bothers you, or, I just want to have that friendship. And then you tell them, and they clam up and all of a sudden are uncomfortable and it's awkward. It's like, oh God, so many people pretend to be that direct, upfront, real person. And they're really not, because when you call them on it, they immediately fold. And it's been very enlightening for me and interesting. And even when I sat with all those housewives and I lived in Beverly Hills, the
Oh
people
gosh.
that live the people that live in Beverly Hills are really actually pretty down to earth, even though they're celebrities. They were very real. I knew a lot of them. But when I was at that dinner party, sitting with those women, it was so hard to sit there because they were all just so void of any realness to them or authentic nature to them. And it was just excruciatingly painful. I don't even know how else to put it. But my point being, I think people are out there more wanting money and power, and that's replaced good character in how we were raised to be
Yeah.
honest and to be direct, and that real people, if you offend them, will reoffend you, like they'll offend you back, and then you'll hug and it brings you closer. You're like, you jerk,
Yep.
it's just, it's bonding actually, and those are the best people you'll ever know. The ones that get so afraid of the conflict of having a conversation where you disagree are the people you don't want to deal with, because they're out looking for a bunch of falsehoods that you are avoiding. So I think death does really teach you, what real pain feels like. So if you lose somebody that wasn't a real friend, that doesn't really hurt compared to what you've been through. So I think you're able to
Well, you
explore more.
yeah. The illusion goes away faster. You
Mhm.
start to feel liberated more easily. You start to recognize that, well, I wasn't aligned with that, and like I think the more authentic you become, the more painful it becomes to be for being around someone who seems void, like you were describing. You become more sensitive to it.
Right. I agree. I do. So where can my listeners find you and more information about your book?
My website is called bylauracarney.com. That's B-Y, not it's not
BUI.
B-U-Y, like my stepbrother
You
said
can't
once, which
buy
makes
her.
sense because he was trying to get people to buy my book. But no, it's B-Y, like a journalist byline.
I love that. I love that. Okay, so that's great.
Yeah.
And are you on Instagram or anything on social
I
media?
am. I'm my father's list everywhere else. Yeah.
My Father's List. So go check out Laura Carney, My Father's List. Let her book and her story inspire you and help you to connect in whatever way you need to connect with the other side. And thank you for coming back, Laura, anytime. I loved having you. And I hope you actually get to go back on another tour at some point, because I think people need to hear your message and you have a lot more to share of what you're learning still on a journey that I don't believe has ended with the writing of that book. I think you'll go forward and collect more knowledge and have more experiences and gain a greater connection with your dad than you even have now, and have your own experiences of connecting with the other side and getting turned up. So don't be surprised when your abilities get turned up. It's part of you saying to the universe, I'm open to it. They are going to take you up on that. So if you ever have an issue with that, let me know. I will walk you through it happily. and thank
Thank
you for
you.
sharing your dad with us. Thank you to you, my listeners. Tune in next Tuesday for a fresh episode of The Dead Life. And to all of my believers out there, don't stop believing. That was great. Thank
Oh,
you.
thanks. I hope it was okay. It was so delayed.
You were great. I thought you were. Oh,
Okay, cool.
sorry. He's helping me because I'm technologically not great. So just click on that.